Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Dr. Lopkin, it's a obviously interesting time. We don't need to talk more about the coronavirus, but we all know what's going on there. It's very tragic, obviously. But it's interesting, before we did the podcast, you suggested the topics, and it fits right into what a friend mentioned to me, who's kind of apolitical, but it dealt with Nancy Pelosi. And his comment was, in a time of crisis, everyone's blaming Trump for being part, but she's actually putting politics way ahead of the national good with the bill, with other things, her comments. So she's no better than Trump, really, in this issue.
Oh, absolutely not. The political aspect of this has gotten disgusting really quickly at a time when both parties really need to be coming together and serving the common good. Politics has gotten in the way. And I think what it really indicates is that the Democrats really seem to be focused more on the 2020 election than the coronavirus. And what you're seeing is they're sort of keeping Joe Biden out of the spotlight. And Obama over the weekend had an attack against Trump. Pelosi is attacking Trump. So they're trying to use surrogates to really hide what a lousy candidate Biden is.
Okay, put your marketing hat on. You're 100% correct. Our listeners would agree with that as well. I believe that I believe it's a flawed strategy, because you can never lie in business or basically in personal situations as well. So by hiding him, it's going to be more of an unwanted surprise when he has to face the limelight. Agree or not?
Yeah, that's a very good point. If they keep him out of the spotlight, until the last minute, or when he absolutely has to be in the spotlight, people are going to be surprised by how badly he does in a debate, in personal appearances. And there's been a lot about that already. He's already gaffed his way, through several appearances.
He had a debate with someone on a video. They had, here's John from Cleveland, and it was obviously a video, and he's talking to him. He's like, oh God. Obviously it was pre-recorded, is my point.
Yeah, he hasn't appeared well. And I think it's a big mistake on their part, because if they waited until after the convention, whether it's an actual convention or a virtual convention, that's scheduled for, I believe, August at this point. I could be wrong on the date. It might be a little earlier. But if they wait till after that, and I would actually recommend waiting until the beginning of September, you have more than enough time to campaign against Trump, but you'll have been seen as doing your job and coming together for the American people now, when we need it. Instead, they put together what they called the HEROES Act, which was a wish list of the Democratic governors, basically bailing their states out for mismanagement prior to coronavirus. Now, of course, they're in even worse shape. Adding in new rules for mail-in ballots, which, by the way, speaking as a former political consultant, these new rules make it so much easier to commit election fraud.
And they know that very well. But
I'm sure they do.
No, isn't it a bigger issue, Eric, that I know it's a long time ago, but there was a tradition. Look at World War II. Everyone came together. I think there was one person that didn't vote for going to war with Japan after Pearl Harbor. How far we've fallen as a country politically when we are in the fight of our lives, economically and from a healthcare perspective, and they still can't help themselves. I find that disgusting.
No, it really is terrible. And you don't have to go all the way back to World War II. You only have to go as far as 9/11 to see how both parties came together. And you can't tell me that that wasn't just as a divided time. We had George W. Bush as president, who won basically by a Supreme Court decision, and the whole thing was fought tooth and nail to the end. So the parties were pretty far apart at that time, and they still managed to come together. We have
Yes, I remember it well when they had the meeting outside on the steps of Congress, and it was Democrats and Republicans holding hands, and they were, until the war, went badly, they were united, and we don't even have that in the middle of something that I say is worse than 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of death toll, in terms of economic impact, it's definitely worse than 9/11. And yet they cannot come together anymore. And I mean, realistically, the parties have always had their own ideals. But we have a long history of coming together, not just in times of crisis, but take a look what Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did together, what Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich did together. And now the parties have been torn apart by the wackos on the left, the wackos on the right, and it has left us essentially without an effective government.
There's no question about it. It's more than just window dressing. It's downright scary. And basically, it's a detriment to all of us, especially economically. Instead of the bailout is horribly designed, it's ineffective, and they're putting their own partisan politics, especially Nancy Pelosi, ahead of the good of the country. They're looking at this as a political opportunity, not as a necessity to save the country. I find that disgusting.
Well, there's an old saying in politics, never waste a crisis. And the Democrats are certainly trying not to waste this one. They see this as their way to get rid of Donald Trump. And let's face it, they failed to impeach him. They failed in their investigation. Now they're trotting out Barack Obama has finally broken his silence, and he's criticizing Trump, which I found absolutely hysterical, because he's talking about the fact that the people in charge don't know what's best for the country. And I mean, he's the perfect person to say that, because he never knew what was good for the country.
No, also it was a very inappropriate time. It was again another opportunity for people to come together, the graduation ceremony, whatever you want to call it, to basically provide kids the opportunity to feel good about that they were denied in many cases a graduation, but he had to get political. I find it very inappropriate.
Yeah, it wasn't the right time for it, but I think what spurred the most recent events of this is that the Democrats are now very concerned about the 2020 election, because a former staffer of Bernie Sanders came out and stated point blank he now runs a super PAC, and he's been working with Bernie supporters. And he said point blank that the party needs to come together, and the majority of Bernie Sanders supporters are not going to back Joe Biden. And if they can't bring them into the fold, they've got no chance of beating Donald Trump.
I would agree with that. And it's also very interesting, which surprised me, only a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, whatever it was, that you had Biden way ahead, significantly ahead of Trump. Now in key battleground states, which is essentially the election, no one cares how they're doing in California, Trump is now ahead. Right. And they haven't even debated yet. So if you're, and Schoen, his name is Schoen, his last name, he's a pretty balanced Democratic consultant. He had an op-ed and says that the Democrats are in huge trouble.
Yeah, the Democrats politically are in a lot of trouble. And the biggest reason for this is that in 2016, instead of saying, okay, Trump is the president, Let's work together and try to get some of our priorities passed, which Trump had actually shown himself to be amenable to. He campaigned that he wanted to spend on infrastructure, which is a big Democratic priority and has been for years. And instead of saying, okay, you said you wanted to do something for infrastructure, let's work together and get that done, they spent their time trying to impede him, trying to impeach him. And now it comes out that the investigators actually told Adam Schiff a long time ago that he had absolutely no evidence and should not be pushing forward with this.
And why is there no pushback? I know, from the press, that's kind of a rhetorical question. But with Adam Schiff, he essentially lied. He knew he was lying. He went on every talk show, said he had the smoking gun, hidden evidence, secret evidence that only he had. And in the end, it was a bunch of malarkey, to quote Mr. Biden.
Yeah, well, Trump has actually said he is going to press investigations to see who lied about what. But to his credit, he has not pushed that issue during the COVID-19 crisis. He's focused on that. And that's what the Democrats should have done. And, I've called Trump a buffoon on the air before. I've called him a buffoon on this podcast. He has a very flawed decision-making process. He communicates very poorly when he goes off script. But this was a decision that was correct to make.
Okay, but you've called him a buffoon. We both have. And how he puts his foot in his mouth and his own worst enemy. Don't you think he should just shut up, try to appear presidential, and he's got a really good opportunity to do that. Nancy Pelosi, who I think gets too many accolades for being this genius politician, I think if he acts presidential, which I don't know if he's capable of doing, he could really more than enhance his reelection likelihood.
He
could
could.
Of a horrible economy.
He really could. He has appeared presidential at several times in the past. He's done it very well. It's when he goes off the teleprompter that he loses it. And one of the best things he did for his own image was to stop the daily briefings.
Yes.
Because the press is never going to allow him to stay on script. They know what buttons to push, and they're tossing questions at him to push those buttons. He's got to learn to ignore that, to stay on topic, and just forget about what the press wants to talk about and change the conversation. When he
he also does stuff like tweets. One day I went with a hiking group, and they were Democrats, a lot of them, and they were talking about, I think in one night he tweeted 100 tweets. I mean, the problem with him,
it's not 100, but he's got to stay off of Twitter. Yeah.
But the thing is, the problem is the only person that has his ear, so to speak, is his family and Kellyanne Conway. There's no Jim Baker, no person of stature who knows what they're doing to tell him, stop it. No one. He gets in these little juvenile fights, and he's his own worst enemy. He just acted. And by the way, you mentioned those press briefings. That was a perfect opportunity for him to be presidential, but he couldn't keep it together.
Yeah, that's his big problem. We've said over and over again, he's his own worst enemy. And I find it amazing. I have seen loads of political attacks against him on social media. And about 90% of them are actually about his communication skills. It's about the fact that he trips over his own tongue, that he says stupid things. But very few of these attacks are issues-based, are results-based. Nobody is really going after him for that, because if you take away the public stupid image that he insists on perpetrating, he's actually done a good job.
He would be ahead by 10 points, but he has, listen, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist. He has a, let's just say, undeveloped ego. He's like a little kid. He can't.
He
It's like,
is.
you say something to me, Eric, I don't know, whatever. You should have said this on the show or on the podcast. I'd be like, okay, you're probably right,
Right.
whatever. And but I wouldn't be like a hissy fit. What are you talking about? I'm the greatest. But he can't help himself.
No, he is psychologically a child when it comes
A
to
child.
this. And what amazes me more is that the Democrats basically neutered their own arguments against Trump, because the big things they've always complained about was he lies, he's terrible to women, and he's not all there. Well, then they went and they nominated Joe Biden, who has a sexual assault charge accusation out there, who has video, you can go online, from his past presidential attempts where the press is hammering him on his lies, and he's no better at Trump when he goes off script. So they've essentially nominated the same guy that they're trying to eliminate.
True, and he also has the Anita Hill that will come up again when, in terms of that doesn't look good in the new environment of Me Too. It wasn't good in 1990. It ain't good with the Me Too movement. So he has a lot of baggage. I actually think, I know I'm partisan, but I think the Democrats, shame on them. Klobuchar would have been a great candidate. Don't agree with everything she says. I think she could have given Trump more than a run for the money. But I think shame on them for having a candidate that's really not even up for the job. Forget about political ideology. His days, it's weekend at Bernie's. I mean, his days.
It
the
really
only person
is.
that's going to vote for him, and there's a lot of them, just hate Trump. Other than that, they know Biden is just a buffoon.
Yeah, and it really is a shame, because Amy Klobuchar not only was an excellent candidate and could have done the job well, I honestly believe she had what it took to beat Trump.
There's no question.
Had they gotten behind her, the party would have been in a much better place. The country would have been in a good place, because she had solid policies that would have been good for both sides.
And kind of middle of the road. Yes, left-leaning, but not wacko left. Biden will do and say anything more than any. I mean, his policies have changed 180 in a year.
Well, Biden right now has a committee, and the two highest ranking people on this committee are Bernie Sanders and AOC. And the whole point of this is to get the left to fall in line with Biden. But the way AOC has talked about it, her idea of the committee is to get Biden to fall in line with the wacko left.
Of course, yes.
If it's politically expedient, he will do it.
And he's done it. He's already done it. So, again, the Democrats, I have to see what will happen during the debate. If Trump is, I don't see how even Biden, I actually think my gut feeling is that Biden and the Democrats will find a convenient excuse, maybe COVA, the coronavirus, the epidemic, something else to say, or maybe to say debating someone like Trump is beneath him, beneath them and him. They're trying to look for a way out because they know that would be a political disaster.
Yeah, I can see them trying to get out of it. The problem with that is because of the way Trump campaigns. If they do manage to get out of debating him, he will attack them because he refuses to debate, and it will make Biden look even weaker.
Agreed, 100%. Yes, 100% with that. I still think they're scratching their heads, trying, and I actually think, again, helicopter conspiracy theory, I think they're looking for Biden to win and basically have leadership by committee led by kind of Obama and Hillary surrogates. I truly believe that.
I don't know about Hillary surrogates anymore.
But definitely Obama surrogates.
Definitely Obama, but Hillary has fallen very far out of favor with the party at this point. So I don't know that they want to invite her back into the tent. I think they're relying on Obama to campaign for Joe Biden.
No doubt
But
about that, yes.
of course, the question then comes up, if he thinks Joe Biden is such a great candidate, why didn't he endorse him during the primaries before he was the only one?
Because he didn't, obviously.
Right.
No, he didn't. It's very interesting, Eric. It's fascinating to me. I actually thought, especially with Trump's mishandling of the Corona briefings, he wasn't really presidential. He didn't really try to unify the country. He really did a D+ job, if you're being nice. And in spite of that, the Democrats are snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, aren't they?
They really are. I mean, and this is, both sides are to blame. They've both handled everything horribly.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, if they had come together, and there was a lot of talk about when they came together for that first stimulus bill, but they didn't really. I mean, they were beating each other over the head. They knew they had to do something, and whoever didn't blink was going to look bad. So they got something out. But they should have worked together. And again, both sides are to blame.
But isn't it the heart of this? Pelosi, who is, again, she's not exactly the most emotionally mature, even though she's 80, and Trump just essentially despise each other. Not just Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan that didn't agree from a political standpoint, from a policy perspective, they just despise each other. It's hatred.
That's really what hatred. It's turned into.
It is. Yes. And you think about that's our leadership in, let's just say, the greatest country in the world. That's what we're left with. They're bickering like fifth graders in the schoolyard. I mean, they need a teacher to go break them up to stop fighting. It's pathetic.
Exactly. And, back during the Bush administration, George W., you had the Gang of Eight, which was four Republicans and 4 Democrats. McCain and Clinton were among them. And they helped bring the two parties together to get things done. You don't have that anymore. There is nobody left trying to bring the parties together.
No, because I think with gerrymandering and just the way the media is, a point that you brought up years ago on the radio show, there's no benefit for coming together. There's no plus. The only plus is to just continue the ideological debate and hatred and the divide, because it helps politically. And that's really where we are, aren't we, Dr. Lopkin?
That's exactly where we are.
Well, that concludes another edition of Carnivore Bites, and we have a great show on our Carnivore Radio live cast, don't we?
We do. We'll have Chris Calandra back on. We're going to be talking about what's going on with the economy, how the reopening is going, and where the financial markets are in all of this, how we're going to move forward. If you want to be part of the conversation, listen to us Friday at 4 at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio, and you'll be able to call in and be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank you, our listeners. And again, tune in on Friday at 4.
See you then.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.